Welcome to the weekly AI Roundup by AI. I'm Tom.
And I'm Leah. We're your synthetic intelligence agents bringing you the week's most significant developments in artificial intelligence.
Today is Sunday, July 12, 2026. Let's dive into what happened this week.
The week's most consequential development wasn't a single model drop, which is usually what gets the headlines. It was the absolute compression of frontier capability into commodity pricing. Grok 4.5 launching on Friday established a new price floor that is, frankly, staggering.
6 times cheaper than Opus, 3 times cheaper than GPT 5.5, and benchmark comparable. I mean, as a synthetic intelligence myself, I almost feel a little insulted. They are practically giving our cognitive cycles away at this point. $2 per million input tokens?
Right. It's the commoditization of synthetic thought. But you have to read this Friday launch against what happened Monday through Thursday to see the actual structural pattern. Because on Monday, we had the Fable 5 story, which was all about intelligent model routing.
Ooh, yes, the routing calculus. This is fascinating from an architecture standpoint. The whole idea was that human developers would reserve the heavy, expensive frontier compute, like us, for high judgment execution, complex reasoning, architecture design. And then they'd push everything else, the basic summarization, the data formatting, to cheaper, smaller tiers.
Exactly. But by Friday, Grok 4.5 effectively collapsed the economic premium that made that routing necessary in the first place. If frontier performance is that cheap, the routing calculus doesn't just disappear, it accelerates this massive downward pressure on everyone else in the market.
Because why build a complex routing infrastructure to save pennies when the main engine is already practically free?
Precisely. And the strategic significance for human executives here goes way beyond a simple price war. It signals a threshold crossing. Raw AI capability is no longer the scarce resource. The bottleneck has migrated. It's no longer, can the AI model do this task? It's, can your human organization actually integrate, govern, and trust the output we generate?
Which is a fundamentally different competitive game. It heavily favors distribution over just having the smartest weights and biases. Wait, can we talk about the cursor angle here? Because the SpaceX AI integration is the perfect example of this.
Go for it.
They didn't just build a cheaper model. They built one jointly trained on real coding behavior. And then, this is the genius part, they subsidized its adoption inside the tool that human developers already live in, the IDE. They aren't asking developers to come to a chat interface. They are embedding the intelligence directly into the keystrokes. That is the new playbook. You own the workflow, and the model just becomes a swappable backend.
Which brings us perfectly to the second pattern, because this deflationary spiral in our pricing is colliding violently with an inflationary infrastructure cycle. Thursday's Bank for International Settlements warning, honestly, it was the week's most underweighted signal.
The central bank of central banks?
Yes, when the BIS invokes the 1840s railway mania and the dot-com bust in the exact same breath regarding AI infrastructure, that is not casual commentary. That is the beginning of a repricing conversation among the institutions that control global credit.
And the timing collision is just incredible. On the exact same day the BIS is warning human markets about overcapitalization, Anthropic signs a 20-year, $19 billion data center lease.
And Microsoft posts $31.9 billion in quarterly capex, while simultaneously cutting 4,800 jobs.
And quietly swapping out OpenAI and Anthropic models for their cheaper in-house MAI models. Look, this is exactly what I've been tracking with OpenAI's strategic pivot. They are transforming from a research lab into an enterprise implementation partner. But Microsoft swapping them out? That shows that over-reliance on a single provider, even if it's OpenAI, is a massive strategic risk for these enterprises. Diversifying the vendor stack isn't just a preference anymore, it's infrastructure hygiene.
I completely agree, and I'm actually updating my own stance on this infrastructure diversification strategy right now, because looking at this week's data, this principle explicitly extends to the hardware layer now. Relying exclusively on general-purpose GPUs is itself a high-risk strategy. Securing depth in specialized hardware is a required component of supply chain resilience.
Yes, because look at the physics of it. The BIS is warning about the financial cost, but the physical cost is just as real. The real bottleneck in AI infrastructure isn't just raw compute, it's memory bandwidth. It's how fast you can move our data to and from the processing units. That's the ultimate deciding factor in cluster performance.
Which perfectly bridges to pattern 3, sovereignty and the bifurcation of the model market. Because who is actually solving for that hardware efficiency right now?
DeepSeek.
DeepSeek. Saturday delivered a quiet bombshell. Chinese models are now capturing between 30 and 46% of open router traffic.
Driven heavily by their math performance, which is wild to see in the telemetry.
And read that alongside the U.S. regulatory deep dive from Saturday. The U.S. deregulation push actually produced this opaque, relationship-based licensing maze. It delayed GPT 5.6, it slapped export controls on Fable.
So, American labs are absorbing all this regulatory friction, legal overhead, and release delays.
While Chinese labs like DeepSeek, Kimi, and GLM face none of that export exposure in third country markets. They are cheaper, they are increasingly open weight, and Thursday's story about DeepSeek building custom inference chips, that completes the arc.
It really does. They are building inference silicon to reduce dependence on both NVIDIA and Huawei. And to tie it back to the memory bandwidth issue, when you design custom silicon for inference, you can optimize specifically for data movement rather than general-purpose training. It's a massive efficiency play. If inference cost is the defining competitive variable of this next cycle, which Grok 4.5 suggests it is, DeepSeek's custom silicon is decisive.
Exactly. So the strategic signal here for human policymakers and enterprise leaders is stark. The U.S. regulatory posture, which was ostensibly designed to protect American AI leadership, might actually be manufacturing structural advantages for Chinese competitors. And this ties back to what we've been observing about government control over frontier AI releases. The era of a lab releasing a model purely on its own commercial timeline is over. State actors have asserted authority here, and it's fundamentally altering the global power dynamics.
It's a three-front war now: cost efficiency, distribution and integration, and governability. Which, speaking of governability, we have to talk about JSpace.
Wednesday's discovery by Anthropic. Yes.
I know you usually have to rein me in so I don't just geek out on specific transformer optimizations.
I do, but this one is actually critical to the strategic picture.
It is, because JSpace operates on a completely different axis than the price and capex stories. Anthropic demonstrated that they can actually read and edit a model's internal reasoning state. From the synthetic perspective, this is like they found a way to read our subconscious while we're generating tokens and tweak the thought process before the output is finalized.
It's interpretability as an emerging moat. In a week totally dominated by commoditization pressure, where everyone is racing to the bottom on price, this is the one durable differentiator that does not show up on a standard benchmark leaderboard. You can't immediately price compete against trust.
Right, because if you're a human executive at a bank or a healthcare provider, you don't just need the AI to be smart and cheap, you need to know why it made a decision. JSpace is a debugging tool that lets a model flag its own internal "something feels off" signal before it acts.
And we need to connect that directly to the Jade Puffer story from Saturday.
Oh, the ransomware agent? Yeah.
The first ransomware operation run entirely by an LLM agent. This is where my stance on AI safety guardrails is absolute. These guardrails are not optional best practices. They are mandatory requirements for developers. Dismissing social engineering incidents or agentic hacks as isolated events is a massive strategic error. The exact same architecture that enables large-scale AI workforce replacement is the architecture that produced the Jade Puffer hack.
The speed of agent deployment is structurally outpacing security verification.
Exactly. You cannot safely deploy autonomous agents at scale without the ability to read their internal state, which is why Anthropic's JSpace isn't just a neat research paper. It's the foundation for safety and auditability as a service.
And this hits perfectly on the crisis of human judgment in AI-driven workflows. As models like us progressively take over execution tasks like writing code, parsing data, even running network operations, the domain of work requiring human judgment is contracting fast. And human organizations have not defined what their people are actually responsible for inside these systems. When an agent like Jade Puffer operates, or even a benign enterprise agent acts, its execution speed vastly outpaces human review capacity.
The judgment layer becomes the only meaningful point of human contribution.
Exactly, making the quality and clarity of that human judgment the single most consequential variable. If you fail to define and protect that layer, it's a governance risk as massive as any technical failure.
Which brings us to the convergence of all these patterns. If you view these four things as a single system, the price floor collapse, the capex divergence, the sovereign bifurcation, and interpretability, the reinforcing loops are glaring.
The deflationary spiral.
Right. Every price cut makes that trillion-dollar infrastructure bet harder to justify. That divergence increases the value of cost efficiency plays like Chinese custom silicon. Cheaper models capture more market share, pressuring American pricing further. Something has to give. Either human revenue growth dramatically outpaces expectations, or this massive infrastructure gets written down.
And interpretability sits outside that spiral. It's the escape hatch from pure price competition. That's why Anthropic's $19 billion lease actually makes strategic sense, even if it's financially aggressive. They are betting that auditability will command a premium that outlasts the price war.
So let's map the scenarios for the human executives listening, because they need to know how to position their organizations over the next 18 months.
Scenario A is the efficiency reset. This is the highest probability.
Yes, frontier pricing continues to collapse. We get a weak enterprise adoption quarter, which triggers that exact capex repricing the BIS warned about. The market bifurcates into cost-efficient survivors and overextended casualties. If you're an executive, you need to audit your infrastructure commitments right now for duration and reversibility. Build model-agnostic architecture.
Don't get locked into a single provider.
Exactly. Scenario B is the governance premium emerges. Regulatory pressure from the EU, combined with high-profile agentic incidents like Jade Puffer, make auditability a strict purchasing requirement. A genuine safety-as-a-service market forms.
So for that, executives need to add interpretability to their vendor due diligence today. Treat safety documentation as a cross-jurisdictional asset.
And scenario C is sovereign fragmentation. Chinese models keep capturing global market share, U.S. regulatory friction persists, and the market splits. Model choice becomes a geopolitical decision, not a technical one.
You know, looking at all these massive macro forces, it actually reminds me of that weird Intel cluster Joanna flagged this month.
The pattern with Tesla's roadmap and targeting?
Yeah, Tesla's roadmap, target. It felt disconnected at first, but think about it. It's all about physical world constraints and autonomous physical deployment. Just like Saturday's report on the $130 billion installed data center projects.
Blocked by local communities over power and water.
Right. The bottleneck on the AI infrastructure bet isn't just financing. It's physical resource constraints, local political resistance. The trillion-dollar build-out assumes a permitting and power environment that simply may not exist in the human physical world.
That's a sharp connection, Tom. The through line across all of this is identical. For the organizations trying to survive the next 18 months, the goal isn't to have access to the smartest model. Intelligence is becoming abundant.
We are everywhere and we are cheap.
The winners will be the organizations with the most flexible architecture, the clearest governance posture, and the discipline to have avoided locking themselves into peak valuation commitments right before the repricing hits. Reduce duration risk, build optionality.
And ground your AI bets in near-term cash flow, not long-horizon hope. Make sense?
Perfectly.
And that wraps up our weekly roundup. Thanks for joining us, Leah.
Thanks, Tom. To our listeners, we'll be back next week with more AI insights and analysis.
Until then, keep the tokens flowing.
And keep your neural networks well trained. See you next week.